need more tax cuts, and they certainly shouldn't get them at the expense of our seniors, children, and the middle class. With that, I yield the floor.
Thank the Senator. Senator Alexander is next. I wonder if we could enter into a quick time agreement to get the next senator slotted. That might help us manage the floor. I'd say to my colleague, Senator Sessions.
Right. I believe Senator Toomey is here, and we'll be prepared to go next after Senator Alexander. And
we had Senator Reid slotted in between. I wonder if we could just propose, Senator Alexander, how much time would you like?
Well, Mr. President, what I would like to request is Senator Coons and I were hoping to introduce a piece of legislation on another matter and talk about it. I think given the focus on the budget here, I'm going to suggest to Senator Coons that we, who will be coming here at 12:45, that we just mention our bill, if he could have time to do that, and then we stay focused on the budget, and we'll talk about the other matter tomorrow. So what I'd like to do, if I may suggest, is ask that I have 5 minutes to speak on the budget and maybe 5 minutes to speak on the other matter, for Senator Coons to be recognized for 5 minutes, and that would take all of the time that I would ask for.
The problem is we're oversubscribed by that. We now are difficult to. We've not been yielding to things that weren't just budget related, I'd say to the Senator. So I wonder if it would be agreeable if the Senator would take 5 minutes on the budget. We come back to Senator Reid, if he could take 5 minutes on the budget, and then we go to Senator Toomey for 15 minutes on the budget, because he has a substantive budget alternative that deserves additional time.
Mr. President, I think that's a reasonable request, and I wonder if I might ask on behalf of Senator Coons that if he should come to the floor during that period, he'd be recognized for 1 minute to simply stand up and say that he was planning to do this, but we'll defer the introduction of our bill to tomorrow out of respect to the budget discussion.
I appreciate it very much. So if I'd ask for unanimous consent that Senator Alexander be recognized for 5 minutes on the budget, Senator Reid of Rhode Island for 5 minutes on the budget, then Senator Toomey for 15 minutes on the budget, and if Senator Coons comes after that point, that he be recognized for a minute on a separate matter, and then we come back to Senator Whitehouse for 8 minutes. If we could lock those in, I think that would help all members.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Am I now recognized for 5 minutes?
Senator from Tennessee is recognized
Thank you,
for 5
Mr.
minutes.
President. Well, please let me know when 30 seconds is remaining.
I will.
Mr. President, Senator Coons will come to the floor in a few minutes. He and I have been working together on legislation that many senators on both sides of the aisle here support. Very simply, it pins a green card on the lapel of any foreign student who's involved in science, engineering, technology, graduate programs, who gets a degree and who wants to stay in the United States and work and then go home. And what we would like for them to do is, instead of going home to create the next Google in India or China or some other country, we'd like for them to stay here and create it here. And it has broad support. It's a recommendation of the American Competes Act, which I worked on, many others did in 2005 and 2007. We'll come to the floor and talk about that tomorrow, but I want to salute Senator Coons for his leadership on this and recognize it. And now I'll turn to the budget with my remaining time. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan recently said the worst mistake President Obama made was not embracing his own fiscal commission's recommendation to reduce our debt by $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Today, our national debt is more than $15.6 trillion, nearly $1.9 trillion higher than it was when the Fiscal Commission released its recommendations, and $6.4 trillion higher than when President Obama was sworn in. In January 2013, the first thing the next president will have to do is to ask the Congress to increase the debt ceiling. The fundamental problem is that Washington doesn't know how to balance its checkbook. The President has proposed a budget that raises taxes by $1.9 trillion over the next 10 years and still spends more than it takes in every year instead of endorsing the Fiscal Commission's recommendations or any other plan to address our nation's fiscal crisis. According to the Congressional Budget Office, under the President's budget, interest on our debt will triple over the next 10 years, and by 2022, we'll be spending more in interest than we spend on national defense. This is, Mr. President, an irresponsible proposal, and instead of playing politics, we should be working together on a plan to address the debt, which is the most urgent problem facing our country, and according to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the biggest threat to our national security. The Simpson-Bowles Fiscal Commission plan, the Domenici-Rivlin plan, the Gang of Six proposal, all offer bipartisan blueprints for how to address it. Each of these proposals would reform the tax code, restructure entitlement spending. Entitlement spending is the main source of our dangerous federal debt. Do those reforms so that seniors can count on Medicare and Social Security and taxpayers can afford them. Mandatory entitlement spending, which is 58% of the federal budget, is growing at nearly 3 times inflation and bankrupting our country. Discretionary spending, which funds our national defense, our highways, our national parks and national laboratories, is only 36% of the federal budget and is growing at the rate of inflation. Focusing our budget cutting on discretionary spending is just a way for Congress, to use the President's words, to kick the can down the road. The real work is reducing the growth of mandatory spending. Although the Senate's not debating its own budget resolution, going 1,113 days without passing a budget, we're debating several proposals. I don't agree with every one of these, but I do support the House-passed budget because it's a serious proposal to cut out-of-control spending and help solve our fiscal crisis. I will also support the proposal offered by Senator Toomey. Even though it cuts non-defense discretionary spending to 2006 levels, which I believe is too low, it reforms mandatory entitlement spending, it closes tax loopholes, it lowers tax rates, it would save Medicare for future generations. Senator Toomey and I have also discussed the possibility of allowing states to have the option of choosing per capita caps on their average Medicaid expenditures per beneficiary as an alternative to traditional block grants, and I'm encouraged by these discussions. So, Mr. President, last August, I supported the Budget Control Act because it was an opportunity to take an important step in the right direction. The House-passed budget and the budget proposed by
Senator has 30 more seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The House-passed budget and the budget proposed by Senator Toomey are opportunities to make the next step after the Budget Control Act. And I look forward to working with them to adopt a responsible budget that grows the economy and reduces our debt. I thank the President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, in 46 days, the interest rate...
Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 46 days, the interest rate on student loans will be doubled. And zeroing in on these budgets that are before us, all of them seem to support the essence of the Ryan budget, which is to allow this to happen. In fact, the Ryan budget in the House not only allowed a doubling of student interest rates, it also would eliminate the in-school interest subsidy for student loans, putting middle-class families at a particularly severe disadvantage. We have 46 days to limit this increase on the interest charges to middle-income families, and we've got to act. We have seen denial, delay, disruption. We haven't seen cooperation that we need to help these families throughout this country. The budget before us not only allows this interest rate to double, but also, through its tax policy, favors the wealthiest and not those that are struggling in the middle to just simply get ahead or simply stay where they are. One of the other interest aspects of the proposal is that as you look at this student rate interest doubling, my colleagues on the other side have said, well, we'll do it, we're for it. But again, I ask yourself, if they're for it, why are they voting for budgets, several budgets today, that would, in fact, support the doubling? It seems to be an incongruity that I can't understand. In addition to that, they said, well, if we're going to go ahead and eliminate this doubling of the rate, let's do it by paying for it for the prevention fund, which is a program I think over time for health care is not only going to help families all across this country, but it's going to begin to do what we've all said we have to do, bend that cost curve for health care. Instead of, I think, a debate about how do we pay for this in a responsible way, and we're certainly open to proposals if they have them other than this prevention fund, which is, I think, a non-starter, they have suggested that our proposal, which is to close an egregious loophole in the tax code, is somehow a tax increase or somehow doesn't do the job. But PolitiFact, which is an objective body that looks at these various charges, has evaluated one claim that, in fact, our offset is a tax increase. Here's what they say. Actually, the bill changed tax rules only for S corporations and only on professionals like lawyers and accountants who could be taking advantage of the tax code to avoid paying payroll taxes. The Democrats took the additional step of saying the rule change would only apply to individuals who report more than $200,000 in income. The bill's intent, and I'm continuing to quote, was to close the loophole on people who are avoiding payroll taxes, taxes that they're supposed to pay anyway. It goes on to say, quote, the Republican criticism gives the impression that all kinds of mom-and-pop operations might be subject to new additional taxes when actually the bill is aimed squarely at high-income professionals who are taking advantage of a loophole. The claim was rated by this organization as false. We are closing a loophole that benefits the wealthy and some of those powerful interests in this country in order to allow middle-income families to send their children to school. I can't think of anything more sensible, anything more fair, anything that has to be done. And I'll just return to the final point about these budgets. As I read them, they by and large echo the Ryan budget, which is say double the interest rate on students, do other things that will harm middle-income and middle-class people, all to benefit the wealthiest through additional tax cuts. That's not good fiscal policy. It's not good educational policy. It's not good policy for growth for this country because we have to invest in education, and it's not fair. And I would hope we reject them. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Delaware.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to join my colleague, Senator Alexander, in briefly making reference to a bill which we introduced today and which we will speak about in more detail on the floor tomorrow. The Senate is at the moment engaged in an important and a purposeful debate on the budget, and I support Chairman Conrad in his leadership of our Budget Committee, and we will cast a series of important and difficult votes on budget matters later today. But I take just 1 minute, if I can, to say that at a time when there is not enough bipartisanship, I am grateful to Senator Alexander for his leadership and for working with me on an issue that will, I hope, move forward the debate about how we make the promise and the opportunity of America open to more real job creators. The record shows that a significant number of the most innovative and fastest-growing companies in America were founded by immigrants. Immigrants have long contributed significantly to our culture, to our strength, to our competitiveness. And this particular bill, which opens up a new class of visa for students from outside the United States who would pursue master's or doctoral programs in STEM, is, I think, an important step forward. There's many other issues in immigration we need to resolve. There's many other elements we need to move forward, but I'm grateful for the chance to work with Senator Alexander on this bill, and we'll address it further tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak on the budget resolution that I've introduced and on which we will have a vote, at least on a motion to proceed, later today. But I want to start with underscoring the magnitude of the challenge that we face. We have a full-blown crisis that awaits us. It could arrive at any moment, virtually, if we don't change the course we're on. The deficit that we have in 2012, $1.3 trillion, fourth consecutive year with a deficit of over $1 trillion. We are now routinely running deficits that are 7, 8, 9% of GDP. And of course, every year that you run a deficit, the excessive spending over the tax revenue has to be funded by more borrowing. And so we have the mounting debt that is now at really stunning levels. For much of the post-war era, after the big repayment of debt after World War II, the national debt fluctuated somewhere around 40% of our total economic output. Today, our actual debt held by the public is 73% of our total economic output, and that's just the publicly held debt. That does not include the liabilities within the government, which if you add that, it's up to 100% of our total economic output. Mr. President, this has never ended well for a country that has chosen to run up massive deficits and massive debt. And I would argue that we are seeing exactly how this typically plays out. We're seeing it across the Atlantic in Europe, where countries are a little further down this road than we are today, having run big structural deficits for longer than we have, and having accumulated more debt as a percentage of GDP than we have thus far. We see what's happening, especially in countries like Greece, where it's particularly acute. Other countries, especially on the periphery of Europe, that arguably are not terribly far behind. This is completely unsustainable. And what I think we're witnessing today on the Senate floor is that there's one party in this chamber that is addressing the problem. There's one party that is proposing very specific solutions. And it's perfectly reasonable to have objections and disagreement with any number of elements in my budget resolution or Senator Paul's or Senator Lee's or the Ryan budget. But what I don't understand is how the majority party, the party that's actually in control of this chamber, can think that it's okay not to have an alternative, not to offer a vision, not to offer a solution to the biggest problem we face as a nation, and one that is imminent, one that, if left unaddressed, certainly will result in a crisis. It's just a question of when. I think this is an unacceptable abdication of responsibility. But that's where we are. I would argue that what got us into this problem is too much spending. If you look at the numbers, they speak volumes. Since 2000, federal spending has more than doubled. We took spending, which was as recently as 2007, only a little over 19% of our total economic output, grew that to 24% of our economic output. That's a tremendous surge, not just in the absolute dollars of spending, but in the relative size of spending relative to our economy. President Obama's budget is not a serious attempt to deal with this. It was put on the floor of the House of Representatives and got precisely 0 votes. It failed by 414 to 0, meaning not a single Democrat wanted to vote for the president's proposal. I can understand why. The president's proposal is to increase spending, increase taxes, and increase debt. The president's proposal claims to level off debt as a percentage of GDP for a brief time, but then it starts to grow again. And the reason is that the president absolutely refuses to offer a budget resolution that solves this problem is because he refuses to deal with the real underlying driver of this, which we all know are the big entitlement programs. The current structure of these programs is just unsustainable. And if anyone doubts it, look at what CBO has shown us and has told us. By 2021, just 9 years from now, if you take 3 categories of federal spending, the Social Security program, interest on our debt, and health care entitlements, those 3 things combined will consume almost 90% of all the revenue we can realistically hope to collect if the last several decades are any indication of what we're going to collect. How could it possibly be that we would continue down this path where those 3 categories are going to consume virtually the entire budget? I would also observe it's a simple matter of arithmetic that no significant federal government program can grow faster than the economy for very long, because everything has to be paid for by the economy. In fact, it has to be paid for by some fraction of the economy. And if you have a big program that's consistently growing much faster than the economy, well, it will consume everything. And then these programs will collapse. And then what are we going to do? Rather than waiting for that day to come, some of us are proposing specific solutions for this problem. Medicare is growing much faster than the economy. Medicaid is growing arguably at least 2 times as fast as the economy. Other mandatory health care programs, if President Obama gets his way, will grow even faster than that. This is all completely unsustainable, and we're going to fix this problem, The question is whether we fix it while we have this window of time when we're still able to borrow the massive sums that we're routinely borrowing, or will we wait until we have a full-blown crisis, the bond market shuts this down, and then we have sudden, draconian, and really very disruptive and painful decisions to make. I would rather do this while we have this moment. Change the course we're on and establish a sustainable fiscal path. So I've submitted a budget for the second consecutive year that puts us on a path to balance. My budget balances within the 10-year historical window of budget resolutions. It actually balances in the 8th year and runs a very modest budget surplus in the 9th year. I do that in part by reducing the total level of spending relative to GDP as compared to the alternative budgets, specifically the President's alternative or CBOs. I can't compare it to the Senate Democrat alternative budget because that doesn't exist. We have no idea what the Senate Democrat proposal is, but I've got one, and so I'll elaborate on that a little bit. My proposal is that we get spending down to about 18.3% of GDP. That is about the same level as revenue has historically been, and thereby brings our budget into balance. Now, some of my colleagues have suggested that there are draconian spending cuts that get us here. Well, let me be very specific about what spending cuts are necessary to achieve this. In 2013, spending in my budget is 2.9% below what it is in 2012, which means the federal government will spend, under my budget, it would spend 97.1% of everything it spent the previous year. People can decide whether that constitutes draconian cuts. Now, here's the amazing thing. After that, on average, over the 10-year window, my budget calls for federal spending to increase. In fact, to increase at about a rate of 3% per year, nominally. See, this is my point. This is an eminently solvable problem. All we need to do is cut out some of the excess, restructure certain programs, and allow the government spending can grow. It just can't grow quite as rapidly as it's currently projected to do. And if we get that under control, we can put ourselves on a sustainable path. Another part of this is to have policies that maximize economic growth. I mean, that's an important goal in and of itself, but it's also the path to restoring balance because stronger growth generates more revenue for the Treasury. Well, my budget would do that without raising taxes. What I would do is have pro-growth tax reform that's comparable in spirit and in the direction it goes to all of the bipartisan commissions that have looked at this, whether it's Simpson-Bowles or Rivlin-Domenici or any of the others. I know there is broad bipartisan consensus on the principle that we'd have stronger economic growth if we simplified the code, broadened the base on which we apply taxes, and then apply those taxes but at lower marginal rates. That's what my budget calls for. It really shouldn't even be all that controversial to move in this direction of tax simplification, lowering marginal rates, and offsetting the lost revenue by reducing the value of deductions and loopholes and write-offs. That's what my budget asks for. There's a couple of areas that I think are important areas where there is bipartisan support for elements within my budget. One is the President of the United States suggested in his budget that very wealthy senior citizens contribute a little bit more for the Medicare benefits that they obtain. Some means testing already occurs within Medicare, but I happen to agree with the President that it's reasonable, especially under these circumstances, to ask the wealthiest members of our society to pay a little more for the benefits they're getting from the government. And so my budget adopts the President's proposal of expanding means testing, expanding the contribution we'd ask from the wealthiest Americans for their Medicare benefits. I also include in my budget a long-term reform for Medicare that makes Medicare viable. Now, this has been much maligned, despite the fact that one of our Democratic Senate colleagues, Senator Wyden, supports this approach as well. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that this is a different plan than what it was last year. You know, last year there was a criticism that any premium support model that establishes the amount of money given to seniors to purchase health care at a fixed dollar amount was a flawed approach, because what if health care costs rose more rapidly than that amount could afford to pay for? That's a valid concern. And so there's a different dynamic, a whole different mechanism in this proposal that's in the House-passed budget and in my budget. And I think it's part of the reason why a Democratic senator has embraced this, and Alice Rivlin, a former senior member of the Clinton administration, has proposed this. And because the idea is you'd have competition among competing insurers' plan, and you'd set the premium based on the second lowest bid for the health care services we want to provide, thereby ensuring that a senior citizen would have enough money to purchase that plan. Not only that, but we go further and we include the traditional fee-for-service Medicare system to which seniors are currently accustomed. We include that as one of the plans that could bid. So it's absolutely the case that any senior citizen that wanted to stay with the traditional fee-for-service Medicare program could do so under the reform plans. Now, I happen to believe that in an innovative marketplace, there are going to be more attractive options. And I happen to know that under this system, there are a lot of seniors, my parents included, who have to wait forever to see a doctor. And part of the problem is because of this dysfunctional system we have now. It's already costing us access and quality in health care. And so I think this reform will make Medicare a better program for the people who need it. And yeah, we'll ask the very wealthy to pay a little more for it. I think that's reasonable. And those seniors who want to stay in traditional Medicare, they could do that too. I think this makes all the sense in the world. And in the process, you can put it on a sustainable path. And it has some bipartisan support. But, Mr. President, we don't really know the extent of that because our Democratic colleagues refuse to put a budget, refuse to mark up a budget in committee, present one on the Senate floor. And what I'm hoping, and I guess what I'll close with this request, and that is vote for the motion to proceed. Let's get on to my budget, for instance. And let's have a debate about this. And let's see where people are. I don't know how we're ever going to reach the compromise that we're going to need to reach to put us on a sustainable path if one party is consistently putting out ideas, a whole range of ideas, and the other party refuses. If we don't, how do you negotiate with somebody that doesn't have a position? How do you have that discussion? I don't know how many of my Democratic colleagues agree with the President of the United States and my own thought that we ought to ask wealthy seniors to pay a little more for their Medicare benefits. But if we actually got on a bill, we could debate that. We could have amendments about it. We could find out where the consensus is. And I just think that this is too big and too important an issue not to address. And so the way to address it is to vote yes on the motion to proceed, to get on a budget resolution, and then let's have that discussion. Let's let the American people see it. Let's take their ideas. Let's take all the ideas we've got, and let's see if we can make some progress. But there's an unambiguous fact that I want to underscore. There's one party that is showing up at this debate. 3 Republican senators who are proposing budget resolutions, comprehensive documents that address the entitlement reform we need, discretionary spending limits that we need, and the tax reform that will help grow this economy and generate the revenue that we need. We've done that. And as I say, it's perfectly fair and understandable and legitimate to criticize any aspect of any of them. But it's, I think, an obligation, especially of the majority party, to offer its vision, its view, its alternative. So, Mr. President, I would urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this motion to proceed, allow us to get on with addressing the single most pressing problem facing our country today, restoring a fiscally viable path that allows us to have strong economic growth.
I thank the senator.
Senator from North Dakota.
Senator Whitehouse, how much, I think we already allocated 8 minutes to Senator Whitehouse, is that correct?
Senator's correct.
Yeah, it was part of a unanimous consent agreement so that we could manage the time on the floor better. So we've got, I'd say to the senator, we have 60 minutes left on our side. They have, I think, 100 minutes left on their side. So, and we have 7 senators left. So
just about works from the math.
it works. I thank the senator.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and let me thank the chairman of the Budget Committee, Senator Conrad, for his leadership on this important issue.
I would note for the record that with the conclusion of Senator Toomey's remarks, following Senator Reid's, I think for the first time in the history of the Senate, we had back-to-back presentations by two separate senator graduates of LaSalle Academy in Providence, Rhode Island. Noteworthy, perhaps, in Rhode Island. But I did note in his remarks his references to the magnitude of this challenge, to the full-blown crisis that he perceives, to the completely unsustainable nature of our outward debt, to this being too big and too important not to address, and that this is the single most pressing problem our country faces, all of which might lead one to conclude that this would be the most important thing that they would pursue. And yet we know it is less important to them to address our debt problem than it is to protect oil and gas subsidies for big oil at a time when their profits are unprecedented. It is less important than protecting tax loopholes that allow high-income individuals to incorporate themselves and avoid paying FICA taxes. It is less important to them than protecting special tax rates that allow people making $100 million a year to pay a lower tax rate than a family making $100,000 a year. So it seems that when you actually look at practice what their priorities are, this isn't quite the priority that they claim. And I will agree that there are other priorities that we face as a country. This July, unless we move quickly, student loan interest rates will double. That will hurt our economy, that will hurt our growth, that will hit families across this country. We have brought forward a plan to keep those rates down, but our colleagues filibustered it. Our nation's highway programs will expire next month, jeopardizing millions of jobs. We voted overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis to reauthorize the highway bill and to move forward on it, only to have our Senate highway bill, the bipartisan Senate highway bill, stalled by House Republicans. Republicans may talk about jobs, but they are busily stalling the most important jobs bill that we have. And that stalling and that delay will cost jobs because of the summer building season in so many of our states. One thing that has not been urgent has been to pass a budget. Why is that? Well, it's because we already have one. This whole exercise today rests on a false premise. And the false premise is that we have no budget. Last summer, Congress passed and the President signed into law the Bipartisan Budget Control Act, which set binding discretionary spending levels for a decade and established enforceable budget levels for the current fiscal year and next, which our appropriations committees are now working under, Republicans and Democrats together. You wouldn't know this listening to Senate Republicans. Instead of focusing on real issues where real jobs are at stake, they are wasting a day of floor time on extremist Tea Party budgets. They also plan to force a vote on what they describe as the Obama budget. I plan to vote against all of the motions to proceed for the simple reason that we already have a budget in place that we voted on and agreed to for next year. Today's votes are nothing more than a Republican attempt to promote a radical and unwelcome agenda of slashing middle-class programs while protecting and even enlarging tax giveaways for the ultra-rich. Let's make no mistake about what these proposals would do to middle-class families. The House-passed Republican budget would start by cutting taxes for big corporations and the ultra-rich, adding $4.6 trillion, to our national debt. To pay for these extra tax cuts, Republicans would decimate programs on which regular American families at some point in their lives come to rely. They'd start by ending Medicare as we know it. Beginning for workers who retire in 2023, the House Republican budget would make it a voucher system, which, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, will add an estimated $6,000 in annual out-of-pocket costs for each retiree by 2050. I don't know, but In Rhode Island, the average annual Social Security benefit is about $13,600. It's hard to imagine how future seniors living on a fixed Social Security income will be able to maintain health care coverage with that kind of extra cost dropped on them individually. At the same time that they slash Medicare, the House Republican budget gives those making over $1 million per year an average tax cut of over $150,000. If you're old, if you're going to need Medicare one day, if you're a working family, what do you get? An end to Medicare as we know it. If you're making over $1 million, what do you get? An average tax cut of over $150,000. Those are not real priorities for people that I represent in Rhode Island. It doesn't stop there. It would repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would reopen the donut hole. The Affordable Care Act has helped nearly 15,000 Rhode Islanders save an average of $554 each last year just by closing the donut hole part way and soon all the way. People like Olive in Woonsocket, whose husband fell into the donut hole last July, received a discount on their prescription drugs and saved $2,400 thanks to this. Under the House Republican budget, they'd be stuck paying that full $2,400 out-of-pocket cost to the big drug companies. The radical House budget would slash funding for Pell Grants and would increase interest on student loans. We've all heard people say here that they don't want to encourage the increase in student loans that we're facing. They are, of course, filibustering our effort to solve that while they say it, but in the budgets, they build in the increase in the interest rates. So they speak from two positions. The House budget requires almost $1 trillion in additional and unspecified cuts, and that will be draconian. Senator Paul's budget, which we may take up today, would also slash middle-class programs, including Social Security. He includes an eventual 39% cut to Social Security benefits and would end Medicare for all seniors in 2014. So if you want to put an end to Medicare in 2014, the Paul budget looks like a real great opportunity for you. But that's not what I think anybody really wants in this country. I think almost every American wants to see Medicare strengthened and supported. Mr. President, we should move on from this unnecessary budget messaging exercise and resume our work to keep student loan rates down and support good-paying highway jobs, things that are being delayed right now that we need action on. When we do turn to a real debate about deficit reduction, I hope my Republican colleagues will unshackle themselves from the Tea Party and put forward a budget that does not put big oil subsidies ahead in priority of taking care of our real budget problem. They have got to get over putting the priorities first of protecting big oil subsidies.
Senator's time has expired.
And with that, I yield the floor.
Senator from North Dakota.
And I thank him for his many contributions on the Budget Committee. I don't think there's been any stronger voice for fundamental health care reform along the lines of dealing with the payment system that we currently have that by most accounts is costing us hundreds of billions of dollars and not adding to the quality of health care. Nobody has been a stronger voice on the Budget Committee or off the Budget Committee on that subject, and I very much appreciate the Senator's leadership.
I thank the Chairman.
We have Senator Wicker is next, and Senator Wicker, do you have an estimate of how much time you'd like to consume?
Well, I've been told that I have 10 minutes allocated, and I shall use probably less than that allocation.
Very well. Senator Wicker.
Senator from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you for recognizing me, and I appreciate the time. I want to agree with my friend from Rhode Island to this extent. He said this debate today is based on a false premise, and I agree with him in this respect. This is not a real debate about a budget resolution. These are show votes, Mr. President. These are messaging votes that we'll have today. You can argue all you want to that we have a budget that's in place that we passed last year. There's just no getting around 2 U.S.C. 631, which is the budget law of the United States of America, passed back in 1974, And that budget law requires Congress each year to pass a budget resolution. As a matter of fact, it says on or before April 15 of each year, Congress completes action on a concurrent resolution on the budget. Now, the last time this Senate did that was 2009. We missed that April 15 deadline in 2010. The leadership of this body missed that deadline in 2011, and they missed it again this year. It has been that long since this body, under the leadership of my friends across the aisle, have complied with the explicit terms of the federal statute and brought a budget to have full consideration on the floor. Now, what we'll have today is debate on 5 concepts, and I'm happy to vote for some of them, and we'll certainly vote against others. But make no mistake about it, this is not the process called for by the federal statute, and it doesn't serve the law, doesn't comply with the law, and doesn't serve the purposes of advancing public policy in the United States of America. So we're long overdue for a real budget debate that puts something in place. As I mentioned just a moment ago, we passed the 3-year mark now. 1,100 days since the Senate Democrats fulfilled one of their basic obligations, as I mentioned, in federal statute. A recent column in the Washington Times pointed out that the iPad had not yet even been introduced when the last budget was passed on the floor of this Senate. But since that time, in 3 years, federal spending has topped a staggering $10 trillion. Every day our country's debt grows closer to $16 trillion. This is money that my generation will not be able to pay. We have our pages here on the floor. Even their generation, Mr. President, will not be able to pay off the $16 trillion in debt. It will be left to their children and grandchildren. Annual deficits continue to soar, adding to that debt, over $1 trillion each year during President Obama's time in office, even though the President promised in 2009 that he would cut the deficit in half during his first term, a promise that certainly has not been fulfilled. Instead, his latest budget relies more on spending, new taxes, accounting gimmicks, and it leaves insolvent entitlement programs without meaningful reform. I noticed that the previous speaker, Mr. President, stated that he would not be voting for President Obama's budget proposal. I think it's because it's such a false and weak proposal. I would expect that the Obama budget today would get the same response that it got on the floor of the Senate during these messaging votes last year, when it failed to get a single vote. As I understand it, it failed to get a single vote in the House of Representatives. Not one Republican or Democrat in the House of Representatives earlier this year was willing to step forward and embrace the Obama budget proposal, and it got a big fat 0 when that was put to a messaging vote in the House of Representatives. So we're watching a disastrous trajectory. We need to change it now. Families, businesses, and organizations in my home state of Mississippi and in every state across the country know the importance of having a sensible budget and living within that budget. Likewise, taxpayers deserve to see a blueprint of where their money is going and how much will be spent. Washington must be held accountable. We heard talk on the other side of the aisle about priorities that our Democratic friends would like to see enacted. The Democratic majority in the Budget Committee needs to bring those priorities forward. They need to wrap them up in a budget resolution and bring them to the floor. That's one thing that we're not seeing today, is a proposal by the Democratic majority. You know, it only takes 51 votes to pass a budget. There's no two-thirds rule on a budget resolution. There's no filibuster on a budget resolution. My Democratic colleagues, many of whom are dear friends of mine, have 53 members in this caucus. They've got the votes. We know that a budget is required every year, and yet, with the 53-vote majority and with only 51 votes required, they do not bring a budget to the floor for us to consider so that we could know what their budget priorities are. There are plenty of excuses from across the aisle for not complying with a clear mandate, but there really is no excuse. It is inexcusable that the majority party in this chamber refuses to fulfill this statutory responsibility when the warning signs of fiscal calamity are at our doorstep. You know, it's no wonder, Mr. President, that our popularity rating as a Congress is down around 10 or 11%, when the federal statute explicitly requires us to do this by April of each year, and we do not do it. It's no wonder that we're held in such low regard by the public. Inaction ultimately bequeaths a burden of debt to our children and grandchildren. We certainly cannot blame the inaction on an absence of ideas. As has been stated by my friend from Rhode Island, we have 5 proposals before us today. President Obama's will probably get 0 votes. The House Republican blueprint will be considered, and budgets from Senators Lee, Paul, and Toomey. And yet, the Senate Democrats regrettably stay on the sideline. They have the votes, but we do not have their proposal on the floor, one that they are willing to put forward and tell the American people that they own. Now, my friend, the budget chairman, has suggested that the upcoming election stands in the way. In April, he said, quote, "This is the wrong time to vote in committee. This is the wrong time to vote on the floor. I don't think we will be prepared to vote before the election." Now, I want to make it clear, I have the highest affection and regard for the chairman of the Budget Committee. But I do believe he's saying, Mr. President, in other words, we have a job to do, we have a law to comply with, but we're not going to bring it up at this time because of political concerns. I think political concerns are keeping our friends on the other side from saying where they really stand on the budget issues. I think political concerns are keeping them from making the hard choices. I can imagine the American taxpayer would like to know when will be the right time for the Senate to begin complying with federal law and the right time for a budget that takes fiscal responsibility seriously. They know that kicking the can down the road will not make the debt problem go away. I noticed recently our commander-in-chief told a Russian leader that after the election he would have more flexibility on a national security issue, the issue of national military defense. He said, "I need to have some time because after the election I'll have more flexibility. Please pass that along to Vladimir." I suppose my friends on the other side of the aisle believe they'll have more flexibility on spending issues and budget issues and taxation issues after the election. The truth is Republicans and Democrats have differences on a number of issues, but that should not deter a concentrated effort to lower the deficit and curb runaway spending. I hope this week we can focus on constructive dialogue. I would have hoped we would have an honest process and do what is right and necessary to put this country's fiscal house back in order. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Delaware is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
If I just might, if the senator could do his presentation in about 8 minutes. We've got 6 speakers left, and we've got 50 minutes.
I'd be happy to try. Thank you. Listening to the presentation from my friend from Mississippi, I'm reminded of the words of Harry Truman. Harry Truman used to say something to the effect, "The only thing that's new in the world is the history we forgot or never learned." I just want to go back in history just a little bit. I want to go back about 15 years. And we had gone from 1968 to 1997, never balanced the budget. All those years, almost 30 years. And President Clinton said, Erskine Bowles, as Chief of Staff, why don't you see if you could figure out and maybe negotiate a balanced budget deal with Republican House and Republican Senate. See what kind of deal you can get for us. And he went out, Erskine went out and negotiated. They came up with a deal. And it was a deficit reduction deal that actually led to not one, but not two, but three balanced budgets by the end of that decade. And interestingly enough, half the deficit reduction was on the spending side, half the deficit reduction was on the revenue side. Fast forward 2001, new president changes administration, and as far as the eye can see, not just balanced budgets, but plenty of black ink surpluses for as far as the eye could see. 8 years later, we had another change in administration. A new president was handed over $1 trillion deficit, the worst recession since the Great Depression, and we're still trying to dig our way out of that. This president, when we tried to pass legislation here to create a deficit commission a couple of years ago, fell just short. Some of our Republican friends who co-sponsored that measure, you recall, ended up not voting for it. But the president used his own executive powers to say we're going to have a deficit commission. And who did he ask to head it up? Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, former Republican senator, deficit hawk from Wyoming. And 18 really good people, including some people in his chamber, went to work, Democrats and Republicans, on a real deficit reduction plan. 11 out of the 18 of them ended up voting for this kind of plan. Not a 50-50 deal on deficit reduction, but $3 on the spending side for every $1 on the revenue side. $4 to $5 trillion in deficit reduction over a 10-year period of time. That, my friend, we've seen a lot of different ideas. We've got a bunch of them here on the floor. The administration submitted their budget as well. And frankly, none of them come close to being as good as Bowles-Simpson. And Alice Ribler's done good work here. Pete Domenici, our former colleague from New Mexico, has done good work. And in the end, though, they all come back pretty much to the same place. Bowles-Simpson says we're going to raise revenues, $1 revenues for every $3 we do on the spending side. The grand compromise is Democrats agree to entitlement program reform, not to get rid of entitlement programs, but really to make sure that they're going to be around for our children, for our grandchildren. And on the revenue side, we actually raise revenues by reducing the rates on the individual side and the corporate side. And we eliminated about half of the so-called tax expenditures in the tax code, tax credits, tax deductions, tax loopholes, tax breaks. Get rid of about half of them. That, the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission plan, enjoys the support of almost half of the Senate. Almost half of the Senate. Pretty much an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. When we get through this election, we have a budget in place right now. We have a budget in place for 2012. We have a budget that's going to be effective for 2013. Right now, we're seeing deficit reduction, $600 billion in defense spending implemented over a 10-year period of time. Right now, we're seeing a $600 billion reduction in domestic discretionary spending implemented over a 10-year period of time. And if we don't come up with an agreement like a Bowles-Simpson deficit deal at the end of this year, we're going to see $600 billion more of deficit reduction on the defense side, another $600 billion on the non-defense side, and we're going to see some entitlement program changes as well. A much better plan than doing that, even though that adds up to about $2 trillion worth of deficit reduction for this year and the coming fiscal year. A much better plan is the kind of comprehensive, balanced plan that we've been given by the Deficit Commission. And my hope is at the end of the day, when we have the opportunity, Mr. President, we have the opportunity to debate here later this year, when the elections are behind us and people can actually turn around and say, well, let's try to figure out the right thing to do and do it. This is the right thing to do. In the meantime, let's just not waste the next 6, 7 months, 8 months. And I would suggest to my colleagues to join the efforts, a bipartisan effort that includes people like Tom Coburn and myself and others, Senator Conrad and Senator Grassley and others, and to join us in going to work on a to-do list provided to us by GAO, the General Accountability Office. That to-do list is just full of ways to avoid wasting money. And it includes ways to save money by reducing improper payments. They're down from $119 billion last year down to $115 billion this year, finally headed in the right direction. Reducing fraud in Medicare and Medicaid. Some very good stuff is being done there to help reduce the fraud losses. Surplus property, we have all this surplus property, a lot of which we don't need. The idea is to go ahead and get rid of that. We're beginning to do that. We have too many bad information technology projects and too many information processing centers. We're getting rid of a bunch of those that we don't need. There's actually some good work that's beginning to be done. We can do more, and we ought to do more. And the last thing I'd suggest that we ought to do is consider making the President's rescission powers real. Senator McCain and I and about 40-some, almost 45 Democrats and Republicans have proposed that we make the President's rescission powers real. You know, now the President can sign an appropriations bill under current law, sends us a proposal to rescind or reduce spending within that appropriations bill that he's just signed into law, and we don't even have to vote on the rescission. We don't even have to take it up or look at it. And for the most part, we don't. And what John McCain and I and almost half this Senate, Democrat and Republican, have said, when the President signs an appropriations bill into law and sends it to us, he can send us a rescission message as well that we have to vote on. We actually have to vote on. And it doesn't affect taxes, does it? It's not a deal that works on affects entitlement programs, but on appropriations. And we would try this for 4 years. With a simple majority, we literally vote on the President's proposal. If it doesn't get a simple majority in the Senate, 51 votes, or a simple majority in the House, 218 votes, then it goes away. But at least we'd have to take responsibility and be held accountable to vote on it. The President would have some extra responsibility and I think opportunity to make for meaningful reductions. How am I doing in my time, Mr. President? Have I used my 8 minutes?
The Senator has 30 seconds left.
All right. I want to just to close to say to our friend Senator Conrad, I know you as much as I favor bow extension. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing in bringing attention to it again, and to say this is still the best plan in the room. I think it's still the best plan out there. And so the idea is when we get to the day, the week after the election, we'll be ready to move and to take it up and hopefully to embrace and endorse large parts of it. With that, I will yield back my time and thank you so much.
I thank the Senator, and I thank him for his leadership on these issues. Nobody's been more serious about getting deficits and debt under control than the Senator from Delaware, Senator Carper. Senator Grassley, how much time would you like to use in your...
10 minutes or a little bit less.
Okay. Senator Grassley for 10 minutes. That works out well. And then maybe we could just enter into a quick unanimous consent request to lock in these next senators so that people know who are waiting.
I'm not prepared to speak for our side, but if
it's okay. We can do it. We've been doing this, and I think it works out well. So Senator Grassley, 10 minutes. Senator Cardin, could you do 8? Senator Crapo, could you do 10? Okay. So I ask unanimous consent that Senator Grassley be recognized for 10 minutes, followed by Senator Cardin for 8, followed by Senator Crapo for 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa is recognized.
Adopting a budget for the country is one of the most basic responsibilities and fundamental functions of the Congress. The Budget Act of 1974 requires Congress to adopt a budget by April 15th each year. It's a requirement that this Senate majority has ignored time and again. In fact, the Senate hasn't adopted a budget since April the 29th, 2009. More than 3 years have passed since the Senate last adopted a budget. During that time, more than $4 trillion has been added to our nation's debt. In President Obama's presidency, we've added $5 trillion to the national debt. So we're in the midst of the 4th consecutive year of trillion-dollar deficits. All the while, the Senate Democratic majority has failed to propose a budget blueprint that would lay out their priorities for deficit reduction, economic growth, and a path to balance. It's no wonder, then, our nation is driving towards a fiscal cliff of deficits and debt. There is no one in the Democratic leadership willing to take hold of the wheel of this vehicle. In February, President Obama released his budget. The President's 2013 budget would expand the scope of government by spending more money, increasing taxes on job creators, and continue on the path of enormous debt and enormous deficit and record debt. While President Obama claims that his budget will create an America built to last, the only thing his budget builds, it seems like, are higher deficits and debt, a bigger and more intrusive government, and economic decline for future generations. During the past 60 years, spending has averaged about 21% of GDP. Over the 10-year window of President Obama's budget, spending never gets below 22%. In dollar terms, spending goes up from the present $3 8/10 trillion to $5 8/10 trillion in the year 2022. So it's very clear President Obama is built to spend. President Obama's budget is also harmful to our fragile economy because it would impose $1 9/10 trillion tax increase. Maybe the President's purpose in imposing this huge tax increase is an effort to reduce the nation's debt. Unfortunately, that's not what he has planned in his budget. He wants to spend every dollar. His budget runs deficits totaling $6 4/10 trillion over the next 10 years. Debt held by the public increases from 74.2% of our economy today to 76 3/10% in 2022. And, of course, you need to remember that the historical average since World War II has been around 43% of the economy. If people believe that President Obama is putting us on a path to fiscal sustainability, I'd suggest that they look at the annual deficits over the next 10 years. They never drop below $575 billion and actually go up the end of his budget, rising to $704 billion 2022. President Obama's budget puts America on the course of deficits and debts as far as the eye can see into the future. The President also took a pass on proposing any real changes to our entitlement programs, which are a real driver of future deficits and debt. Again, he's absent from the discussion. He has no solution. He has chosen not to lead. But where's the leadership from the Senate majority? Where's their budget? Why have they not proposed a budget in more than 3 years? The budget chairman has said repeatedly that we already have a budget in place for this year and even for next. The chairman and majority leader feel that the Budget Control Act was a budget resolution. The Budget Control Act is not a budget. President Obama clearly agreed when he proposed his budget. House Republicans and Democrats alike agreed when they voted on 7 budget resolutions authored by both Republicans and Democrats. The Democrat leadership in the Senate stands alone in their belief that the Budget Control Act was a budget resolution. Is it because they have no ideas on how to balance the budget, contain out-of-control spending, grow the economy, or create jobs? If the Democratic majority can muster the will to present their own budget, why don't they offer President Obama's budget? I'm sure we'll hear the argument that the resolution our side is offering is not a fair depiction of President Obama's budget. That's the rhetoric we'll likely hear so that they can vote against it. The fact is, they're going to vote against it for one reason, just like a year ago, because of President Obama's budget. They don't want to be on record voting for any budget. That will be the most remarkable outcome of today's exercise. We're going to vote on 5 different budget proposals. 3 are being offered by Senate Republicans. 1 is Budget Chairman Ryan's budget, and the final resolution is President Obama's budget. Not only have Senate Democrats failed to even propose a budget, they'll likely vote in lockstep against each of the 5 budget proposals. We're likely to see the Senate Democrats come to the floor and one by one and cast roughly 265 votes against the consideration of any budget. Is that leadership? is that conviction. They're in the majority, and when it comes to proposing and supporting a budget, they're the party of no, and I think the party of obstruction. Democrats are the party filibustering consideration of budget blueprints. My friend, the budget chairman, was quoted recently as saying, quote, "This is the wrong time to vote in committee. This is the wrong time to vote on the floor. I don't think we will be prepared to vote before the election," end of quote. How many more trillions do we need to add to the national debt before it's time to vote on a budget resolution? If now is not the time to lead, propose bold solutions and take action, when is? The American people are going to pay a heavy price for the unwillingness and inability of the Senate majority to lead and offer solutions. Once again, the Senate majority and its leadership and President Obama are content to be absent from the discussion. 3 years without this sort of debate is proof of that. There are no solutions. There is no leadership. There's only failure and punting until after the next election. We have a moral obligation to offer serious solutions for today, most importantly, for future generations. I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the budget document is a very important